Welcome to the Law School Toolbox Podcast. Today we're talking with Chris Henjum, the co-founder of Esquire. Your Law School Toolbox hosts are Allison Monahan and Lee Burgess. That's me. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the Catapult Conference. Allison also runs the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review on iTunes. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we'd love to hear from you. And with that, let's get started. Welcome back. Today we're talking with Chris Henjum. Chris is an attorney and social entrepreneur. He is the co-founder of Esquire.com, which is the first and only public benefit corporation devoted to providing credible, affordable test prep. Chris is also an attorney and an analyst with Flaherty Hood in St. Paul, Minnesota. So welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks.
So to get things kicked off, can you share a bit more about yourself and what led you to start Esquire?
Sure. So Esquire came out of my own frustration with bar prep. I graduated from the University of Minnesota in 2010, which was just absolutely terrible year to start a job hunt. And in order to broaden my own job search, I took a variety of bar prep courses for various states across the country. And this was a time when a lot of folks couldn't find a job, and student debt was just becoming this huge issue for students. And it struck me just as really bizarre that there was this requirement that in order to work, students needed to hand over $4,000 to $5,000 to 2 or 3 big bar prep companies. And I moved out to DC to begin work, and while I was there, I started digging around at how much it actually costs to license the actual bar prep materials, things like the questions and the answer explanations from the National Council on Bar Examiners, and it definitely was not thousands of dollars. So that huge disparity in costs and the current student debt crisis got me started down this road.
Well, that's pretty interesting that your own bar prep journey got you started on this. So how many bar exams did you take as you were moving around the country?
I took 3. I took one for Minnesota, Illinois, and in DC.
Wow, that's a special type of torture.
It was completely terrible. It was the worst.
So why do you think then bar prep is such an expensive product, especially when it comes to those large commercial bar prep courses, which shall remain nameless, but everybody probably knows what we're talking about, that most people do end up signing up for in law school. I took one of them, so I can't, I did it too.
No, it is nuts how expensive they are. And I think there's just a whole bunch of reasons. I was just talking to some folks who actually who work for this big company who, not these 2 companies, but a big company that administers licensure exams. And they were saying that the U.S. is just odd that they separate the schools from the folks who actually give you a license to actually begin work. Mm-hmm. In other countries, it's not that way. A school actually prepares you and then also gives you the license to begin work. So when it's separated like that, students are subject to these companies that can just run up the costs as much as they want, and it creates this really bad situation. And I think, I registered for one of these huge companies, and I got this huge crate of books on my doorstep that I would never ever read in a million years. It's just too much. It's too much information. It's just too much to go through, and I think that makes a lot of students real frustrated that they have zero choice in choosing what they can select from these bundled packages full of materials that aren't actually tailored to what they want or need. So I think that just a lack of choice runs up the cost, and then the fact that students are real nervous, already have probably hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and what's another $3,000 or $4,000?
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I think back in the day, it used to be that when everybody was getting a firm job, that the firms were paying these bills.
That's right.
And I'll be honest, the firm paid for my bar prep, and so I didn't really think that much about it because, they were going to pay for it, whatever it was. But that's just not the case anymore. And even some law firm compensation packages aren't able to provide, bar prep compensation anymore. So I think that as a student, looking at your bar prep options, the beauty of the internet is there are a lot more options out there than there used to be. So there's more competition. But also, I think you have to remember that these, out of the box packages, like you were mentioning, you get the big crate of books, you get the same online system, is one bar prep option for every single student in the country. And really, that's just not practical. Everybody's going to learn differently. Everybody has different skills. Allison and I recently did a podcast podcast where she talked about how she prepared for 2 different bars without purchasing a large commercial bar prep program because that wasn't what she felt that she needed. And so although it might be nerve-wracking to pick something that is not the norm, day 1 of your 1L year is not when you need to decide how much money you're going to spend preparing for the bar and how you're going to prepare for the bar.
No, for sure.
Yeah. So, one of the things I think is very interesting about you, when we talked for the very first time a little while ago, was that you started this Esquire project while you were practicing law. And Allison and I often call this the side hustle. And so we would call you a side hustle entrepreneur. So what were the challenges of working on this project while having a more traditional legal job?
Well, I think time, hours in the day. I mean, my wife and I just recently had a child, so between my day job as actually working as an attorney and then my night gig, which is, the diaper changing and the preparing of bottles, there's just not a whole lot of extra minutes in the day to go around. But I think, it's getting that good team. A lot of startups like to point to their secret sauce or whatever, but I mean, I hate to say it, but ours is our team. We have a developer, Michael Wilson, who does amazing work, and Anthony Chester, who does the sales and content stuff. And, having those guys who appreciate the social mission and work on this for free because they believe in it makes us super rewarding. And then also just, hearing back from students who are just real frustrated and then are glad to have some avenue to study for the bar, because a lot of these students had nothing. I mean, they either had nothing or they had to go to Wells Fargo, one of these banks that have a special section on their website for the bar loans, which is in itself just nuts. You never hear of a nursing loan. It's just real rewarding. So the challenges, are time, but that can be balanced with other things that are the pluses, I think.
So going back to what Esquire really is, which I realize we haven't covered enough of so far in our chat, students might be wondering. So you're providing credible, affordable test prep. You have licensed some of the questions from the NCBE, the National Conference of Bar Examiners. Really, what is this? Like, if I'm a 3L or a 2L or a 1L thinking about my bar options, what is Esquire as an option for me? What are you really able to offer?
Sure. Well, there's 3 things. There's our real results, we call it, which is our MBE study tool that gives students the answers, our questions, answer explanations, and allows them to track their progress over time. There's a second tool that gives them the opportunity to go through some MBE or go through some NCBE MEE questions, answers, and answer explanations. That can be paired with something like the Bar Exam Toolbox's offerings, because while that's a great tool, I'm not sure that can fully prepare someone for the essays, but it's a great tool nonetheless. Also, there's our MPRE tool that gives them the real questions, real answers, allows them to track their progress over time. So that's the 3 tools. We hope that can be a supplement to, if someone does want to go with one of the big guys. Some of those big guys don't use real materials for whatever reason. Yeah. Or also, if they want to put together their own tailored study package, which a lot of students are increasingly doing, then they can do that. We've also been in discussions with law schools. We actually just sold our first law school last week, where law schools are turning to this sort of thing as a very reasonable way to track their student progress and then intervene in various ways to improve their student outcomes. Because as you know, there's new requirements on law schools to make sure their students actually succeed.
Yeah, and if you're going to a law school where bar prep passage is concerning, it's very concerning, and you're probably getting a lot of communications from administrators and deans about what your law school is going to do to help you out. If your law school is providing you resources to study for the bar, you should use those resources to the fullest extent possible.
Yep, most definitely.
Definitely. And, and one of the things that I like that you mentioned was this focus on real questions. I personally also believe that real questions are important. I think that, if you are studying from the questions that have been retired from the actual exam, it's going to give you a better understanding of what the test's really going to look like. I think, the one thing that can be frustrating for folks is, of course, around civil procedure, the newest question that's on the multiple choice section. We don't have the same banks, at those types of questions, but it's still about seeing how they word these questions, what are the distractors, how they do the answer choices. You really got to dive into it and just get comfortable with doing these questions and going through the analysis and figuring out what went wrong so you can remedy it and track it. And I like the fact that you do a lot of tracking, because tracking success and not so much success, I think, is a very important part of anyone's bar prep.
No, most definitely. And, part of our thing, I hate to give the sales pitch, but a part of our thing is our low cost. I mean, it's a nice way in order to get all the NCB materials at a low cost. We actually, I hate to say it, but beat the NCB on price if you were to go to their store for whatever reason. So, I mean, I really fully believe that you can start to see patterns between questions by taking a lot of them and figuring out what you're doing right or doing wrong.
Yeah. Practice is so incredibly important. We beat this drum with law students and bar takers over and over again, but practice is a huge identifier of who's going to be successful. I talk to people who fail the bar all the time, and one of the first things I ask them is, what sort of practice did you do? It's on my intro student questionnaire that they get if they decide to work for us. And so often it's I had time to do 5 essays, and that's just not enough. It's not enough. It's just not enough. One of the other things that I think is interesting about Esquire is you guys decided to make it a public benefit corporation. And for some of our listeners who may not have taken corporations yet, they may not even know what public benefit corporation is. So why did you decide to structure your company this way, and what is it?
Well, sure. So public benefit corporation is a somewhat recent legal entity that, as a part of its incorporation documents, obligates us to pursue a social mission at the same time that we're pursuing our bottom line, right? So if a shareholder, say like a Tom's Shoes, a shareholder was upset at Tom's Shoes for giving shoes away. Tom's Shoes could point to their incorporation documents and say, hey, that's actually in our incorporation documents. We can do this. So for us, it gives us some safeguards to actually pursue a social mission that we care about. Our social mission is to reduce and prevent student debt. And more specifically, it's to give back at least 20% of our profits to doing so. We do that by contributing to organizations that work to advocate for reforms in legal education. So in our first year, we're giving back to Law School Transparency, which is doing great work on reforming legal ed so that there is less debt for students. At the same time, we're also giving back a lot of accounts as part of our sales to law schools. So a law school, say, purchases X amount of accounts, we give accounts back so that a student who is going into Indian law and is working on a reservation, or a student who might be going into a small rural city to do law and may not have the same advantages in repaying their debt, we give back accounts targeted at those students who face the most challenges. So I mean, it really gives us, I think, a way to feel impassioned on what we're doing, but it also allows us to, open doors. I think law schools in particular are not happy at paying so much for each student if they are purchasing materials for their students. And, I think law schools are looking at alternatives, and I think that a public benefit corporation offers them an alternative. Yeah,
I think that's really interesting. And I think this is such an interesting time in the world where, social entrepreneurship is such a buzzword. But I think a lot of people are trying to take, a business idea and create a social mission for it. I think Tom's Shoes is such a great example, right, of somebody who most of us are familiar with that do this. But I think, when a lot of folks think about how they want to be an entrepreneur, having a social cause, I think, is a lot of what drives folks, especially right now in the current political climate.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it's just really, really exciting as you grow. I mean, you expand your social impact as you grow. And it's just very inspiring to see your own impact on the world as you sell something that's actually helping students in this case, but, in Tom's Shoes, selling shoes or whatever your social mission is. So I think it's just a really cool way to organize what you want to do as a entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think that's really great. So did you always know that you wanted to do some sort of entrepreneurial venture, or is this something that an idea that came to you just while you were torturing yourself with bar prep?
It wasn't while I was torturing myself with bar prep. It was more as I was torturing myself trying to repay my own student loans.
Oh.
So yeah, I mean, that was really the impetus here. As I mentioned, I'm an attorney during the day, but, with student debt, my own, at extreme levels, it's, I think, really helpful to start something on the side, even if it's just an idea early on. It's just really, it's a nice side hobby, and it's cool to see a side hobby turn into a side gig, the side business.
Definitely. So if a law student is listening to this and wants to explore becoming an entrepreneur, what advice would you have? Did you start, collecting tools that might be helpful? Did you meet your business partners first? Kind of what was your journey to becoming an entrepreneur? What advice would you have for law students considering that as the next step?
Well, sure. So I think it's just having an idea that makes sense and really researching it and trying to vet it with family, friends, and your professional contacts. For me, I mean, it's just making those small steps forward, reserving a domain or chatting with similar companies. And as I said, you'll be surprised at how quickly a side hobby can become a side business. Mm-hmm. For me, I mean, I did research, started drafting a business plan, had family and friends tear it to shreds, went to CLEs and organizations and places that ideas like this were being batted around. And then all of a sudden, I'm on this podcast with you. I mean, it's just really, it's amazing how something small can just slowly turn into something that you have business cards for. So, I mean, as far as tools, though, for folks who are a little bit further along, I mean, I would recommend there's accounting software called Xero, which is Xero, which is super cheap and just as good as Quicken, which is somewhat expensive. I would recommend Trello, Trello.
Oh, we are obsessed with Trello too.
It's great. I mean, it takes about 5 minutes to learn and saves you so much time.
Oh, it's the best.
As you go forward.
We think Trello, I think we've written about it on the blog. We think all law students should be using Trello to manage their school life, personal life. I think we have tested the breadths of Trello. We actually use it even in our tutoring programs. If any of our tutoring students are listening to this, Trello, well, because we use it to share information with and manage processes with our tutoring students.
Yeah, I think my whole life is now run on Trello, so it's a very great tool.
Do you track the diaper changes on Trello? Has it gotten to that point?
That's right. No, I should. If there was a way to post pictures, maybe I'd do that for folks. But but I mean, I guess a third one I'd point out is just learning WordPress, which sounds like a huge pain, and it sounds like, oh gosh, I don't even know how to even approach that. But hosting a WordPress theme is something that can be very valuable in broadcasting and showing off your business at the same time that it can be applicable to your day job if you still have one with your law firm or whatever, because they look pretty professional with very minimal work if you just bought a theme. Yep. So those would be the tools I suggest for folks.
Yeah, I think that's really great. We recently had some podcast episodes about ways to increase your kind of skills as an entrepreneur, but also the importance of soft skills, even in your legal practice. And I think that a lot of the things that you're talking about, either productivity tools or just some general understanding of how some technology works around WordPress or promoting yourself, I think those are very important skills. And those are all things that you can get comfortable with in law school. I think when you go into a law firm, oftentimes they are impressed when new associates or new people to the firm can, you're not going to come in and transform how they work, but you can sometimes have suggestions for ways to work more efficiently. And that's only going to make yourself a better lawyer and a better business person.
No, for sure. I think, having legal skills is wonderful, and that's, necessary at working for a law firm, but having these sort of soft skills can make you indispensable at the same time in other ways. So
yeah. What sort of law do you practice during your day job?
So I do a variety of things. So I work for cities, so mainly rural cities, at the Capitol. So that could mean legal work, or it could mean advocating on their behalf. I hate to say the dreaded L word, lobbying, but that's something that we do. And it's really it's exciting in my day job also to work on behalf of cities that are also generally doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So since most of our listeners are law students, I know it hasn't been that long since you've been in law school. What would be your top 3 pieces of advice for students who are trying to find success in law school?
Sure. Well, I think it's real important students focus on grades and all of that. And grades are super important, but the other things that are important are brief writing, memo drafting, that's sort of real world skills. That's the stuff that really matters over the long term and can really help you on your essays for the bar exam. but it's also something that bar exam toolbox assists with, and it's just super important. Second, I'd suggest this is something I learned the hard way, but rote memorization's not the key. Going to write a million flashcards is not something that is going to help. You also need to craft an argument and really understand how the legal principles create an argument that makes sense come essay time or come exam time. And then also, I think, and this is something I didn't do, and I alluded to this in my comment on creating flashcards, because that's all I did in law school, was create flashcards up in a study room, writing thousands and thousands of flashcards, and just being away from everyone and just not showering and not being human. I think that's not good for your mental health, and it's not good for your exam performance, and it's really just disastrous for after law school when you have all these professional connections, or you should have professional connections. And if you leave law school and you've spent 1,000% of your time studying and not interacting with folks, that's going to really hurt you down the line.
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah, something that's not oftentimes talked about is that you're also there to start your community, to be part of your community, be part of this legal community that's going to follow you down the road.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And you never know where folks will end up. I mean, someone may start in this area of law and end up, across the hall from you.
Yeah.
So it's really important. I mean, it's really important to make those connections early on.
Yeah. I also love what you said about brief writing, which, a while back I did a podcast recording at a conference where they were talking about the skills necessary for the 21st century lawyer. And the feedback from recruiters and high-level partners at some large international law firms was really the importance of really the craft of legal writing. And, that's not just being able to put sentences together, but, like you mentioned, you have to craft arguments, but you also have to execute impressive work. And I think that so often in law school, we can get lost in just focusing on grades and forget that you are trying to work on your craft. I mean, if you want to get nerdy about it, and I get kind of excited about things like legal writing, because that's why I do what I do, but it can be fun to get really good at something. And one of the things that I find interesting is I know this is going to sound totally random, but I was reading the new Amy Schumer book that came out the other week. And one of the things she has a chapter on that I thought was completely fascinating was how hard she had to work to learn how to be a stand-up comic. So it turns out that it's not like she was in college being a stand-up comic. She gets out of college and she decides that she wants to be a stand-up comic in New York. And so it wasn't like she just showed up and was so funny they put her on TV. I mean, she talks about how bad she was at first. She talks about finding every opportunity to do any sort of stand-up multiple times a night, different locations. She had to bring friends with her to even allow her on stage. It was like you had to bring 8 people to the audience to get you a spot on stage. But it was fascinating because I think that in law school, and in the legal profession too, there's kind of this assumption that you should just know how to do this stuff when you get there. Yeah. But I think anytime someone's at the top of their game and you really dig down to how they become good at what they do, it's because they study the craft. And I think one of the things I thought was so impressive about her book, which is very funny if you haven't had a chance to read it, but that she has this whole chapter on basically the reason she's good is that she busts her ass and she took every opportunity to practice. She got a lot of feedback and criticism, and she got better and better. And she was really bad when she started, and that was okay. That's not something to apologize for. And so I think it's important if you're struggling in law school to remember that excellence in anything, it's okay if you're kind of bad. You just have to work on getting better.
No, for sure. And it's welcoming those corrections too, and really understanding what went wrong. I mean, I remember my first brief, I got it back from an advisor or from my supervisor, and it looked like someone just bust open a red ink pen on the paper. I mean, it looked like someone bled all over it. And it's looking at that and saying, hey, thanks. That's really nice that you went through that and helped me grow. That's going to help. It's not looking at that and going, oh my gosh, and getting defensive about it. Because those skills are so important going forward if you work in the legal world, in the law firm or elsewhere.
So true. And I think even if you decide to leave the law firm and go into business or something else, I mean, still the written word is how we communicate. I think it just becomes even more important these days with email and, you're still so much of our work. I mean, I love doing podcasts and talking on the phone, but I also balance a ton of my day by just communicating with people in writing. That's basically what we all do. And so if that's something that you struggle with, I think it's important to continue to work on it. And then going back to the bar prep space, that's one of the reasons why practice is so important. The bar, from my perspective, is it's such a mini challenge because it is temporal, right? It's going to end. Hopefully you're going to take it and you're going to pass, but you still have to figure out your craft and what is being required from you. And what I like about the story you just shared about getting that first feedback from a boss, and boy, I remember it wasn't in the legal field where that happened to me the first time. It was my first job, serious job outside of undergrad. I was doing political PR, so I wasn't necessarily lobbying, but I was, maybe helping people who did that dirty word.
Sure.
I was also working with local governments, ironically. But what was interesting is when my boss gave it back to me, of course I thought, but I'm so good. Didn't you hire me?
It's hard not to do that.
It's hard.
Especially in law school. It's especially in law school because a lot of students are at the top of their class and they go to a place where things are totally different and everyone is super smart.
Yeah,
so it's tough.
It's very tough. And so, we call this the growth mindset, which is exactly how you reacted to it and where I came around and reacted to it, but taking it as feedback and taking it as what can I do to become better. And I think in the bar prep world, when you start studying for the bar, the first time people want to put off practice because it's so painful. The first time you do the essay or the first time you do the performance test, it is very sobering because it's probably going to be a bit of a disaster. I'll just be honest, it's not going to go particularly well. If you're taking the UBE and you're doing those MEE questions, these essays are 30 minutes. Cranking through these essays in 30 minutes is not easy. It's not easy. No. And so it is, you kind of get smacked upside the head a little bit because it's frustrating, and it's all about what you do with that information. If you realize you don't know any of the law and you thought you knew everything about constitutional law, then that's really important information for you to regroup and then come back and practice again. The solution is not, I don't have enough time to practice, so I should not practice again.
That's right, because you have to pass the exam, so you need to learn it, and that's the best way to do it.
It is the gatekeeper. Like we were talking about, it's expensive to buy bar prep and things like that. It's also really expensive to fail the bar exam, unfortunately, because you have a delay until you can get another job. Oftentimes, I know in California, the amount of money it just takes for the privilege of sitting for the exam is thousands of dollars, and that's not necessarily taking into account hotel rooms and things like that. So, taking this idea that you're always a work in progress and that you're learning and growing, and that when you get these bumps in the road, which happen all the time during bar prep, that you're able to overcome them. Is very important. I also love that you I love that you did flashcards but hate them, because I hate them. My flashcard story, though, I hated them back in elementary school when I would make them to memorize the state capitals or something like that. I've always hated them. But what's fascinating to me is when I never used flashcards during all of law school, and then when I got to the bar exam, I made a whole stack of flashcards for real property because everyone else was doing it.
Yeah.
And I think I used them once and then realized it was a complete waste of time.
Well, it is. It just takes so long to create. And I think that goes back to finding a design, finding a bar prep package that actually works for you.
Right.
Because students study differently, and they should be able to tailor their study package to how they study. And I think there's tons of great small companies out there. I've talked to folks who run a flashcard company, in fact, that have a great product.
Is that Critical Pass?
It is Critical Pass.
Yeah, we'll link to a review of their product on our show notes.
Yeah, so there are awesome other small companies that can help students succeed, and it's knowing what you need rather than just following, the usual, I need to do X because that's what everyone else is doing. Right, exactly. I think really owning this experience for yourself. No one
when you pass the bar is ever going to go back, unless you may work in the bar prep world, and ask how you passed the bar. Like, no, it's not like a common interview question. It's not like you're going to sit down. They're going to be like, so, which bar prep company did you use? Nobody cares. Nobody cares. All they care is if you passed. And to be honest, we have another great article that we'll link to in the show notes, written by an attorney who had failed the bar once. And, I think even she talks about the fact that no one's ever asked her if she failed the bar in an interview. Because no one really cares once you pass. Like, all that matters is that you pass.
Yes, no, for sure. And there's just so many resources out there, like I mentioned. I mean, it can be done. It can be done, and it can be done in various ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you are listening to this and you have yet to start on the bottom line with a big bar prep company, or you're concerned about the money, my pieces of advice are wait to decide how you're going to prep for the bar until you have more information about what kind of law student you are, what your academic challenges will be, so you can figure out how to put together the right package for you. And and then I think, resources like Esquire are good to check out. But again, it's all about, what do you need? What are your struggles? And what resources are available? And make sure you also know what your schools are providing, because you never know. You might be getting some spiffy stuff for free and you didn't even know about it for free. Because school is kind of like free, except it's like $100,000 plus.
It's true. And, if you run into your school offering a package that you don't like, I think that you should suggest to that school, hey, I don't like this package, because we've talked to some students who really don't like what's being offered. And I think it takes some students speaking up to really hammer that home, because schools sometimes sign these agreements where it only can offer one particular thing. And if that's not working for you, you need to let your school know.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And just because they're showing up at your school to table does not mean that those are the only options out there. So do your research, be a good consumer. And, I know that you guys are offering some MPRE resources as well, right? Not just...
Yes.
Yeah. So
we're offering MPRE and MEE resources. So if you want to test run our software using the MPRE, it's $14.50, so it's... or $16.50, so it's very inexpensive.
Yeah, and I think the MPRE is a great way to test run software, because I think most of the companies offer a low cost or a no cost option to see what their products are. And this is, again, something that's completely underutilized by law students, because you need to shop around, find out what your options are. And so I think it's great that at that price point they can check out your product. Well, where can people find more about Esquire? Is it just best to go to the website?
Yeah, esqyr.com, or you can just Google us. And if your listeners want a discount, we're actually offering folks who are listening to this a discount of 10% off on our MEE and MBE study tools. So you can shoot me an email at chris@esquire.com. Otherwise, go to esquire.com/bar exam toolbox, and you can see that offer there.
Great. We'll also include that in the show notes, so you guys can quickly look it up. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I think this has been really interesting. If you enjoyed this episode of the Law School Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on iTunes. We'd really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Allison at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com or allison@lawschooltoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. If you are starting to think about the bar exam, remember we also have our sister site, the barexamtoolbox.com, with a lot of helpful free resources, information about our courses and tutoring. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.